My name is Kate McGough, and I'm the Publishing Manager at Nelson Primary. It's my pleasure to introduce Jacinta Conway, an experienced educational leader, literacy specialist, and passionate advocate for inclusive, evidence-based practice with over 20 years in education across Australia and the UK. Jacinta's work focuses on translating research into practical classroom impact, supporting teachers to use data-driven approaches that accelerate student learning. And today she'll be sharing how handwriting, spelling, and reading work together to build strong literacy foundations, an area that is critical for long-term student success. So I know that you'll find this session practical and inspiring. So welcome, Jacinta.
Thank you, Kate. It's lovely to be here and welcome everybody. Thank you for attending live. We're heading towards the end of term at the moment and I know everyone's really busy, so I really appreciate you being here. And before we start, I know, Kate, you've just done the housekeeping. You've talked about session being recorded. So I will just go into a acknowledgement. So we respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today. It's the Bunurong people, actually, not the Wurundjeri, because I'm at home this time. Here in Melbourne, their deep connection to the land, waters and skies stretch back tens of thousands of years. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today. Thank you. Okay, so the goal for today is to be looking at handwriting, spelling and reading and how we can get this to all work together. And the best way to do that is to develop efficient routines that support the integration of those three skills, because we know that reading and spelling are inverse, and as such, it's best to have them working together. And so that's the goal today. But before we start, I thought I'd just give you a bit of insight into the International Dyslexia Association. This goes back for me, my knowledge in this space around 15, 16 years ago when I did one of my first trainings, is that they recommend 45 hours of coursework to be able to teach reading so that you understand structured literacy. So 45 hours is a lot, okay? I can show you reading, spelling and handwriting in a snapshot today in this webinar, but I can sort of just give you an overview and broad, and I will go specific at times. But as far as walking away from this and thinking, oh, now I know how to do all these things, you might not be able to walk away and completely implement a routine that's recommended, but just to have an awareness of the routines that we need. Okay. In addition, I just wanted to sort of give you a bit an additional insight into some of the programs that I have been trained in. So I've got some reading and spelling programs up on the screen, some writing programs, and some frameworks and methodologies and pedagogical approaches there as well. So you can see in the reading and spelling that I've done Spalding, Thras, spelling mastery. In writing, if I go across here, I can see we've got SRSD, which is a self-regulated strategy approach. William Van Cleve is really well known in writing. He's no longer, unfortunately, with us. Anita Archer does both reading and writing. And the difference between some of these programs is some of them are direct instruction. For example, multi-lit or rewards or corrective reading. They are direct instruction where you will be reading from a script and you will be, and they are, initially they're really designed for intervention, but they definitely work at a classroom level. But that's called direct instruction. Other programs use explicit instruction, and explicit instruction is where you have more autonomy to design your routines to align with the scope and sequence or to align with the decisions that you make as a school. So if you've made a decision to use these readers as part of your decodables, you get a scope and sequence that goes with that, and then you can design your explicit instruction routine to go with that. And that's part of the goal of today. So the 5 areas that I want to look at is handwriting, just got something on my screen. I'll just quickly move it. Spelling, aligning. We want to align that to accelerate our progress. We'll definitely be looking at phonics. And from there, with the phonics, we do want to move into morphology and vocabulary to support fluency and comprehension. And the high impact routines is the number 5. Usually when I do a webinar, I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but because we're integrating, these are the 5 things I will be presenting on, but you won't necessarily see them in a sequence because when you're integrating, you can't just do it in that order. They all come together at a point. All right. Oops, daisy, bring them away. Okay. All right. So routines. Routines stay the same. When we have a really good routine, we keep that routine, but we change the content within that routine based on what we need. And the big takeaway I'd like you to be thinking about today is that if I give you a routine, we can keep that routine the same, but we want to change the questions to be at the point of need of where students are at. So this is an example of big picture. I will be coming back to this screen several times in the presentation. Okay, let's start with handwriting and look at handwriting fluency and assessment. Handwriting sits in writing, and there are different models that we know and understand with the science of reading and the science of writing. This model that I'm looking at here with you is called the simple view of writing. I have talked about this before in previous webinars, which you can click on and you can find with Kate later in more detail. But as a snapshot here, it's important to see that transcription and handwriting comes under transcription. So transcription multiplied with idea generation or ideation gives you your written expression. And each of these components have to work together in order to be able to write and spell and, inversely, read more efficiently. So as far as research goes, this is a paper that I have come back to many times. It's more than 15 years old now, by Steve Graham. Steve Graham is a very well renowned in writing, and he wrote, "If you want to improve children's writing, don't neglect their handwriting." This is readily available. If you Google this, you'll get this online as a PDF. I've summarised it in this graphic. So I'm going to break the graphic down for you here and say, what does that paper say? It says, early handwriting instruction improves your writing quality. Automatic handwriting frees the cognitive space, so you're reducing cognitive load. And if letter formation is slow and effortful, it will just interfere with composition. So what he recommends in his paper is start with manuscript writing when you're teaching handwriting, not cursive. We start with manuscript because it's familiar and easier to learn. The next thing he recommends is you've got to build letter knowledge alongside letter sounds. So you've got to know the names of your alphabet. Then you teach efficient letter formation. Following on from that, you have to have practice routines that are short and frequent. And I've got the term here, initially avoid massed practice. You just want them to do just a little bit until they've got their formation accurate. Then you continue to develop that fluency and legibility with practice. And then finally, you've got to monitor and support that. Okay, so of all the things, that's a little summary there. We know that in my key takeaway down there would be in grade 1 to 4, handwriting should be taught regularly in short sessions. I would say 10 to 15 minutes daily. And that would look different depending on your year group and your assessment data. How would I initially teach handwriting? Of all the training I've done over the years from that first screen, this is one method that works for me, and every time I've used it, it's been successful. It is using the reference of a clock. So I've taken a picture here, and I know we often have these Velcro dots, okay, in schools, so we can create this with our Velcro dots and just put numbers on them. But we want to teach them about directionality and where we have a clean and a very accurate starting point. So here we're starting at 2 and we're going this way for clock letters. So I call my letters that start at a certain point clock letters. You might do 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. It depends on your preference. I prefer 2 because it just means that you get that clean line, which I'll show you in a moment, where you can pull down quite easily, where it will close the letter more accurately. Then I'm still going big here because I'm looking at gross motor skills, because if you just tell students to do this, it's very hard to know if they've done it. When you've got a classroom, it's much easier to check their understanding when you go big. So still got the dots on the carpet here, but now I've put some masking tape down, which I got from Bunnings, which is actually quite thick. This is a fake picture, but I have actually done this with the real thing. And then on this one, I'll call, this is my baseline when I start to bring in lines, and this is my top line, and then I'll demonstrate it again. This is the direction that we go, and the goal is that we go all the way around and we use a dialogue that's explicit that we can then apply to any letter. Once I've got this, and just as a review here, we know that transcription skills require all these skills that you're seeing on the screen. We know it requires memory, planning, and organisation. We know that if you've got your handwriting, it will support spelling. So if handwriting and spelling are slow, that will become an issue. So from here, I'm then going to take this and use a more, if you think mathematically, we sometimes say concrete, pictorial, or before abstract. I'm now going pictorial. Okay. I'm crossing over with my pedagogical approaches and subject content here. So now I'm just going to go from the clock to just the ones I need. And then I'm teaching the directionality again. I bring in my lines. I reinforce it until everyone can articulate it or demonstrate it. We know with assessment, it's either whether or not you can read, say, write, or make it. We want them to be able to write it, but we also want them to be able to say what they're doing here. And then from there, we choose what sort of lines we're using, because in the audience right now, we have people from all over Australia and New Zealand, and everyone does their lines differently. So this is an example of lines, but my language can stay the same. I still have a baseline, I still have a top line, and I still have a midpoint. So I can now put my clock here to give you that difference. But as long as my language is accurate, I've got a reference point to give feedback and to check for understanding. Here I've got dotted thirds, same thing again. I'm now ready to teach. Now with handwriting, I might just do some feature formations to show what this would now look like. And I'm working from now, not the very beginning of school. I'm now working towards, a few terms in, because they've had lots of fine motor practice as well as the gross. So I've got a circle for circle letters that start at 2, and any letter that has a curved part. I've got a short line, I've got a tall line. I would be emphasising my starting points. This line here is the same length as a tall line, but it goes at a different point, slant line and horizontal. And the only other thing that I would really be emphasising is the directionality of which way we are writing. I always reinforce making us write in that way. So this is me modelling. I did this, here's one I prepared earlier. So I used my iPad skills to do this on the PowerPoint, but you can see now I can just say, I started at 2, did a circle, closed my circle and did a straight line. This has a tall line and a circle part. This starts at 2 and finishes at 4. But it lets me now differentiate between B and D. I've got really clear language. I can prevent reversals and ensure that, especially for B's and D's and any other letters that are very difficult for formation, that children know where to have their starting point. And I certainly wouldn't be teaching B and D together. I'd make sure I get one mastered before doing the next. So that's an example. I'm not going to go through all the formation, reinforcing directionality here. But what I will say is that I then need to be thinking about practice and independent practice. This is from a book called High Leverage Practice for Active Student Engagement. You can see here, this is the name of the book. So that if this is, I highly recommend this book. It just gives you really great tools to be able to break down strategies for teaching with explicit instruction, but also check for understanding and types of practice. So it would say, do initial practice to get short-term memory. Once they've done that, you want to distribute it over time, so you're not doing the same thing every single day. Then you'll go into cumulative practice, which means that you interleave. Okay, so you're building up the skills. You're not going to start with something that's complex to simple. You're always going from simple to complex so that they can build those skills up. Interleaved is similar to spaced and distributed. It's just about what you're doing in between with your types of practice. And then here we've got retrieval. And I think retrieval practice is the hardest one because for a lot of the others, you might have a visual in front of you, but when you're retrieving information, it's really important that you're taking it from short-term memory. It may not have mastered to long-term memory yet. And for retrieval practice, you really need it in your working memory so they can retrieve. So I'm giving that as a landing point now to reinforce the types of routines that are now going to be introduced. So we start with handwriting because handwriting takes longer, which I'll explain when we get into phonics. Okay, from here, we know that all of this matters because if you don't know how to do your practice and build the practice up, it's really hard when misconceptions arise or you have to undo. Anyone who's seen a child who reverses a letter or a number, it is very hard to undo. So it's really important that we get the accuracy right, go slow at the beginning, and then build so that we've got the right sort of practices in place at the right times. Okay. All right, from here, now let's look at our scope and sequence. So we're using, here it's Engage, Nelson Decodable Readers. And you can see I have highlighted set 1. And in set 1, I have to teach MSAPIT as app it. So I know I have to do handwriting. I know I'm teaching these phonics and I want to combine it. And I know that they are going to learn the phonics way quicker than they're going to be able to write them. And I know this because I've taught this for quite a long time. I'm just looking for my phonics cards while I'm talking to you. And part of when you do this is that you work out some letters are way easier to form than others. And in this set here, we've got to have a look now and say, okay, so we're learning about handwriting. We know that we've got different types of lines. We've got to teach them about spatial awareness, position, sizing. How long is it going to take the children to learn to do that? Compared to how long will it take them to learn these speech sounds? It is going to be way quicker to learn the speech sounds and way quicker to learn the phonics than it is to be able to write them. So you're chipping away with handwriting formation and you'll find that you can teach the phonics way quicker than you can teach the handwriting. So handwriting just needs more practice. But here we are, we have this many readers in the first set, and that sort of reinforces to us that we've got opportunities with so many readers to determine how many words we want them to be able to reach, how much opportunities do they need to practice this, and how much opportunity can we give them to reinforce certain letters. So if I really want to reinforce S and P, I'm probably looking right now at sip, 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 okay? Because that will help me teach if I have to come back to this and reinforce the formation of these letters. So I'm showing you here certain letters that are more challenging. Okay, so here's my letters from set 1. We know we've got a couple of clock letters here. A is a clock letter, S is a clock letter. I haven't included it there, but S is tricky, so I'm going to pause on that one. It's too long a conversation. This is just a concept for now. A is much easier, and even if I show you right now with my board, okay, I know I can teach that quite simply. And if I don't have any lines, it's fine. If I do have lines, I know that I can show them exactly where that's meant to sit in my model. Oh, I've almost got that there. P, on the other hand, for anyone who teaches lower primary or middle primary or upper primary, you'll know the children that can't do Ps because they capitalise them. So we have to know which letters we need to teach and reinforce. They might find the speech sound much easier, but they'll need more instruction and more time to get the position correct for handwriting. And knowing this is helpful because it will inform our decision making when we are scope and sequencing and determining how much practice certain letters need. We can introduce a letter a day, but some letters are going to need a lot more practice than others. I does not take long. As long as they've got the dot in the correct position, it's a very easy letter to write. So in review of this, they need to know their direction language, their relationship to space and lines, sizing, starting points and ending points, and your model and how well you model it will determine your baseline for how quickly they do learn it. Okay. I was going to show you about the P, but I've sort of already explained that. So here's an example of what you might see with letters of P. So just reinforcing that this one does take longer. Okay. From here, we now want to take those sounds that we have and we want to put them into some routines where we can integrate now our handwriting and our spelling with reading. Okay, so here I've got a simple routine on the screen, 1, 2, 3, 4. Number one, I want to do a little bit of phonemic awareness to get them to listen. I think in today's education, we have a lot of screens. We do a lot of PowerPoints. We don't have to do PowerPoints for this routine, but you can. But the thing and the difference between the two is if you are using a screen and a PowerPoint, the children won't be looking at you as much. They will be looking at the screen and your attention can be split because you are looking at the screen. Whereas if you don't have the screen up and you've got an idea of what you want to teach, it's without a screen, it can be easier. So let's say we've done that pin and I have these words here. Before I even show them, I might say, the word is pit, say the word. They say pit. Also listen to me sound it, it. Now you do it. Okay. And then I might say, how many sounds? They might say 3 and I'll say, great. Now segment and blend. Okay. As part of a quick review. Okay. So I'm already checking in. The other thing I will be doing is the same thing with high frequency words, which if I go back to this, I'm going to regret doing this scope and sequence here. This is a simple scope and sequence. There is a more complex one, which I will show you on future slides. But where you get this set here, you also have the high frequency words that go with set 1. And I'm pretty sure is one of them. So, excuse me, I just don't have my normal screen here, so it's a bit tricky. All right, so I might say the word is, say the word. Now listen to me sound it out. Is. How many sounds? Right. Now you sound it out. Is, segment, right? Put it back together. Is, and then I will show them what it looks like. So the research says to always have a visual, but I also think it's really important to see if they're looking and listening and looking at your mouth and listening before you bring the visual in so that you can see that they do know that there are 2 sounds there. And then you can say, well, this isn't saying here. We'll learn that other sound later. This is how we write is, okay? And so then they're ready to practice. And you can do the same thing with she, but here you might start like this. You might say she, and once they've got an idea of phonics, you might then just bring in a line like I've just done here and just add that in to say that you know what that now looks like. So you sound it, then you do your phonics, okay? Then you have your I use phonics cards. Here are mine. And I'll do a quick review. And I'll say, it's time for you to say the sounds. And I will just say, let's begin. And then I'll just show the cards. And I do nothing, but I'm looking and I'm listening. And if there's an error, I might cover up and say, keep that nice and short. We say, And then I'll stop and listen. And this review, because it's set 1, will literally take 15 to 20 seconds because we'd be doing it every day. So then what I want to do is I want to maybe bring in some questions to match that. Following this, once they've mastered or they've got to a functional point of handwriting, I might ask them to write some of the sounds down, and then we'll go into spelling. And initially, I'll just be getting them to spell several words on a whiteboard. Okay, I will not get a whiteboard for the written, but I'll get into that in a moment. So let's break down some of those routines. I've just gone through this with you. Let's look at a phonics routine. I show the card, I listen to them say the card, and then I move to the next card. If I had a bigger set, it would take a minute. When I'm first teaching, I've only got 6 cards. It's not going to take very long. But the second time, once I've gone through, the second time, here is where I can ask them check for understanding questions. And earlier when I put up that slide that said, keep the routine the same, just change the questions, this is where, when I know that they're still working on their handwriting formation, I would be asking the children when they get to a certain card, I'll just put my card down and they're here. So say we get to the letter P and they say, my question might be, where might I start this letter if I was writing it in my book? So they have to tell me the position of where they're starting it. And I might say, is this a short letter or a tall letter? Or for this one, is this a short letter or a tall letter because this is a more challenging letter to write and they tend to developmentally write it much bigger. But my questions at this point, at the beginning, are either around handwriting formation, if that's what I've just taught, or it's about the speech sound. So it might be in the word tap. Where can you hear this in the word tap? Or where can you hear this in the word tap? So that you're getting them to isolate phonemic awareness and isolate where the speech sounds are. So they're thinking about the word and they're looking at the visual at the same time. That is my phonics routine. It doesn't take very long. I give feedback on pronunciation. It really takes about, in total, even when you get to end of year 1 or middle of year 2 and continue on potentially in year 3 and 4 as well, it's no more than 5 minutes. It's a review. It's not a lesson. Okay. So I'm going to do that all the way through here until I finish all the letters of the alphabet. And then I know from after set 5 in my scope and sequence, I'm then going to be looking at phonics where we've got letters that represent sounds, or as you can see in set 6 here, we've got some spelling rules. So I need to have lists. Okay, so I've got lists of words that I'm going to build up to teach them to read and spell, and they will match my decodable readers. And quite often I will just take them from the back of the reader because they're the words that they're going to be practicing in the reader. Okay. A note here that when you look at CVC words, the whole point of a CVC word is to know and understand what the vowel sound says, because the vowel sound is short. Once you think your children know and understand this, you can go to the supplemental supplemental set here. And if you think your children are ready, by all means, bring VCE in so that they can distinguish between the two. Because it is, if they've mastered the concepts and your routines are working, they will accept what the E does very quickly. As long as they can hear the vowel sound in each, it's a very good way to pull from this scope and sequence where you want to add in when you need to and where you can. Okay, with that in mind, silent E here, it does have more complex spelling rules. You may, some of what I mentioned earlier about different programs, these jobs here that I'm showing you, there's different jobs. Initially, this concept of jobs of E I got from my training in Spalding, and it gives me 5 jobs. I will just teach these and find books that support this. For example, one of the jobs of E might be to make the C and the G say its soft sound. I can go back now to my scope and sequence and I can find books that will support that. And again, with those ideas, I would determine where the children are at based on my class assessment, whether or not I need to pause on it or if they're ready to know and understand that and can do repeated sounds or like more than one sound for one letter. Okay, another concept to be able to decode and spell is looking at this new set. So, Kate, there were new sets that came out. I should have probably mentioned this, but there was a whole lot of new sets that came out, and I saw them on social media, probably on LinkedIn, um,
Yes, I'll put a link
about
into
2 months ago.
chat.
Yeah.
Exactly. 110
These
new
books
titles.
here, yeah. So you can see here, there's this set 16 has the soft C and G, but set 15 gives you your open and closed syllables. Once you've got that as a baseline, you're ready to start introducing spelling words. And your routine from earlier with the phonemic awareness, bringing in the phonics, starting to write the phonics down and spell, will start to expand into developing lists of words that help you to know and understand how to use these. Here are some examples of open syllables. So we can see, especially if you look at E here, the E has the words like he, she, we. They're one syllable words, but the vowel is saying it's long sound because it's in an open syllable. And that really does expand how you teach your high frequency words because all of a sudden they're like, oh, now I understand why she says she. So they're really great to sort of bring in at a point of need based on your classroom assessment data, rather than just saying, I'm just going to go from set one all the way through. You can use scope and sequences based on your class data when you're doing explicit instruction. If you're doing a direct instruction program, it's a little bit harder because you just got to follow the sequence. In some ways, it's easier because you're reading a script and you don't have planning, but in other ways, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Here I've got high frequency words, and with this in mind, this is the more expanded scope and sequence that Nelson has. And here you can see we've got our is, my, and the, I in set one, and these continue on. So that's why I was showing you. If you ask them to say the sounds before you give it to them, then you show it to them. Once you've built up your little set, which I have not written a flashcard for every single word here, but it is a nice way to add that into a routine and check how they're actually able to segment, blend, and then just read. With that in mind, I think that having a chart with your high frequency words already written up, so I've got set 1, 2, and 3 just on a makeshift, if I had these big post-it papers or lined paper. If you have this on display when you're learning, you're building up your bank of high frequency words. And I think with decodable readers, sometimes they can be a little bit of a side hustle, but they do need a lot more exposure. And if you have them here as a list, you can segment and blend the or is, I, my, and then you can go back and read all the words. The more they're reading them and the more you say, what's this word, their sight word will increase. I know we used to say that you had to have 100 words at the end of the first year, 200 words by the end of the second. Not as many scope and sequences and allow for that many high frequency words, but the research still stands that you do need your 100. So you do need to have as many of these high frequency words in little mini routines that you can do retrieval practice as quick as possible. Okay, with that in mind, we're now moving towards more spelling and orthographic mapping, which is that ability to connect spelling with reading. So orthographic mapping is by Linnea Eyre. She wrote the theory on orthographic mapping. It connects spelling, pronunciation, and meaning into memory. And the concept is all words can become sight words, and instruction should target the 4 knowledge bases. There's a reason I put the words up here. one of the reasons for that is words take longer to learn how to spell than they do to read, because they don't know which choice to make. So again, I might choose for some of these spelling patterns to just have them on display and check for understanding questions. For example, I might say, what are we using in the word perfect? Okay, so then they have to say ER. Or what am I using in third? They might say IR, or they might have a code word to match that. So for spelling, we know that you have to have your phonology. So you need to hear the speech sounds and you need to be able to map it to the letters. We also have to have good knowledge of morphology, which means we've got to have our root words that we know, like jump, and then we need to be able to add on our suffixes like jump, jumps, jumping, or play, playing, plays, and then replay as a prefix as well. And those two components are some, but then we move into orthography, which gives us more of an idea of spellings that we specifically teach and have to know in order to be able to read and spell efficiently. We also have to add in etymology. And as an example of that, I would not choose to do this word for phonemic awareness. There's no point. I can't really sound this out. It's a much harder word to learn. Again, I wouldn't do that with this word either. For this word and this word here, I would choose morphology and look at patterns, and I'd bring them all together. And I'd also look at etymology. So I have to make decisions on which words for phonology, which is really almost all of them. So even though you might not think my is regular, it might be an irregular spellings, you can still hear the sounds and make a reasonable connection to go, oh, okay, yeah, well, I can say I. Okay, you can't do that with these other words. So you have to know that and make those decisions for your routines and as you go. Tim Shanahan, I tend to always come back to him for research because he does regular blog posts and he summarizes the research really well. He does he did work on the National Reading Panel 26 years ago, which was published 26 years ago. And it was the biggest research in reading where they reviewed over 100,000 papers in research. No one else has done, no other country. We've had other countries do things that are similar, but they haven't done that quantity of research. So I do value very much when he has a position on something. And he recently did a spelling post where he got a little help from his friends, and his friends are people like who did I mention Steve before? Steve Graham with his handwriting, but also Bear. I think Bear wrote Words Their Way. And I think he's also got some insight from Bowers, who did structured word inquiry. And what he came out from that, it seems to have not taken my next slide, Kate. I'm just going to have to go like this for a second, see if I accidentally hit it or something's gone wrong. So I'll have to just reshare.
Okay, Jacinta. Yeah, just, yep.
I'll
Reshare,
just
that's
quickly
fine.
reshare. Sorry, I'll just
Yeah,
go back
no,
into my
it's all good.
reading view and reshare. It hasn't shown it. He said 6 things, that there are 6 things that you need to know. I think the slide's gone. I'll tell you from memory the 6 things.
You're right
Okay.
back at the start too, visually. Sorry,
I have
Jacinta.
to
That's
go.
okay.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Let me just go to the slide. Stop sharing for a moment and I'll go back to Mr. Shanahan. He said, have lists, but not too many lists. Okay, so you've got to know when to use a list. Here we go. I'll just share that again. Sorry about that. I'll share it like this and then go into reading view. Okay, can you see me okay? Sorry, Kate. Yes?
Jacinta, we can see you, but we can't see the slide.
Oh,
That's
hang
okay.
on. So
That's
I've
all
got it
right.
now.
You
I'm
got it?
just, yeah, I think it's just not letting me go from the beginning. I just have to just quickly go like this.
Yeah,
Sorry about
scan
that.
through.
It's
No,
a
don't
little
worry.
You can edit later. Sorry about that. So he said, while I'm doing this, have your lists, but you also don't just do lists, okay? You've also got to do patterns. You've got to look at the word patterns. So when I looked at the words before, like one and once, look at those patterns there. You can link them to the word lone and lonely. They all come together, and you can make more decisions on that. So, with that in mind, and going back to our routine here, when we start to move into like beyond just the initial sets where we have our 6 graphemes and we're asking you to do words like Pat or Tam or Tim, and they're just relying on their phonology, you've got to have you've got to start teaching rules and application of rules, and maybe do some sorts, like Bear says, do some word sorts to go with it. Here it is actually. Also, you've got to teach the complexity of English. So we know that you be explicit. You know you do a word study. You don't just teach lists. You've got to know when to teach phonology and then when to do morphology. That number 5 thing he said, here it was all along, is that you've got to link your spelling to your writing. So you've got to be able to check your writing. I recently had to mark, quite a lot of papers of about 1,000 words each of kids in the middle years. I put it into AI and said, please tell me all the spelling words that were incorrect, so that I can build a bank of spelling words that I need to teach, rather than trying to, mark everything and create myself a little list. It's really helpful to say, then I know exactly what I need to teach, and there's a big chunk of making it more authentic to their writing, and make spelling meaningful and engaging. So teach little bits and tricks along the way, and don't just rely on one way. Don't just do phonology. Don't just do morphology. You've got to do a mix. Okay, so we've looked now at our routines. Earlier on, I might have been doing a routine and checking for handwriting and a bit of speech sounds. I might now start to move into spelling and look at this routine in the middle here to say, what can I now ask with my check for understanding questions to move them beyond? So they're still doing their phonics review, same graphemes. The graphemes don't change. Okay, they've got to learn their 100 graphemes-ish, but the questions change, and you have to know which questions to be asking. So at this point, when I'm starting to build my spelling up, I know I need the students to know, they have to know their formation of lower and uppercase letters. They have to know the sounds that are represented by the letters. They have to know that letters represent more than multiple letters can represent one sound, and one letter can represent multiple sounds. So that's background knowledge that they have to know. They have to know the individual speech sounds and phonemes. They have to know syllables, and they have to be able to hear syllables when they're reading and spelling. And they need to know that every syllable contains a vowel sound. Once they know this, they're ready to start really learning their spelling rules. And the routines that we've now got established before we really branch into the spellings that we have in some of the higher readers is we want them to be able to participate in these daily reviews for phonemic awareness and phonics. We want them to be able to write at the same, we want them to, I might say a few phonics sounds, they've got to write them down. I'll have now handwriting practice is embedded. I'm not explicitly teaching it, but now I might say today's goal when you do your phonics and I ask you to write your phonics is that all your clock letters from that I mentioned earlier are all starting at the exact spot that I want you to be thinking about, that 2 o'clock. Or today I want you to make sure that if all the letters that go beneath the baseline, that they are all level and they're not going too high or too low. So that is now, I'm embedding my handwriting into my phonics routine to reduce the amount of time that I'm teaching, rather than breaking everything up into handwriting, phonics, spelling. They're all starting to integrate. Okay. My background in sporting has about 30 rules in it. These are the rules. I'm not going to go through all the rules, but some of these rules I will teach in a phonics review. For example, Q followed by U, I might ask in a phonics review. I might have the QU phonics card up and I might say, where can you hear this in the word queen? And they would say at the beginning of the word. And then I might reinforce, and what is it saying? So they need to know and understand that it says there's two sounds there, and this is an orthographic rule. We teach Q is followed by U. Children know that, but they don't apply this easily. So you will see that even though they know the rule, you'll get quite a few children still spelling quiz as KWIZ. That just means that they haven't generalized from their knowledge to their practice. So we teach the rule, we ask questions about it, and then it will come into our spelling routine. The same for this rule. C, saying its softest sound before an E, I, or Y. We're going to teach this. We're going to then reinforce it in using our set 16 readers. I'll take the word bank from there and then I'll start asking them with dictation of these words. The dictation of these words will be on a whiteboard, okay, because I'm checking that they understand the concept. I don't necessarily need them to know how to spell mice, because I'm not going to test them on mice. They may not be writing that word all the time. It's helpful to be able to spell it, but it's not as imperative as all my high frequency words. I may make a small list, I may put it in a workbook, but I want to see if they can apply it initially. And then by the time they do it in a workbook, it might be within a bank of high frequency words, where if you're doing a high frequency word list, you are actually bringing in your retrieval practice and they have to think about this rule later on. Okay, same goes with this rule. G followed by an EI or Y says J. I might teach them, give them some words. They will have to segment and blend, spell them, but I won't just teach it in a word list. It has to be embedded in their practice. And then if I see that they still can't do it, I will then do daily reviews of words that I think that they need to know and be able to spell. You can see here with these two rules, I deliberately brought these up because we do teach them quite often as the gentle Cindy. But if you see them in the high frequency word list, there's not many early on. And this is one reason why children don't learn to apply this, even though they know the rule. It's that knowing doing gap. I know I should go for a run, but it doesn't mean I do it every day. I know that G says J, but I may not be able to demonstrate it when you ask me to spell a word. So it will need more practice, especially in the middle of primary, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Definitely 3 and 4. Here are some books that will reinforce these concepts. And again, one of the things that now that we're getting into spelling rules, we know that we can just look at the speech sound, but once we can apply a spelling rule to go with it, it opens up when you're looking at these readers, how you can use the readers. You don't have to, you can read them for content, you can read them for learning to read, but you can then come back to them and say, how many words did you find? How would you sort them? So they can start to create sorting activities to really reinforce their knowledge and understanding. Earlier, I talked about open and closed syllables, that vowels say their names at the end of syllables. So that's where those readers come in. You can see them on the high frequency word list here. So I'm now accessing high frequency words. I'm accessing decodable readers for this rule. And I will definitely be asking check for understanding questions about these words when I do a phonics review. So if I have a phonics review and I get to the letter O, I might ask, what sound is this saying in the word go, which you can see on the screen, and they need to say O. So then when they go to write go, they know already, they've already got it in their working memory because we've just reviewed it in a phonics review. Here I've got with set 15, these words are when we're moving from single one syllable words into 2 syllable, where you might start to get a few, the CVVC, the VCCV patterns. So you can see, for example, with like Camden and Bobo in the rain, the word Camden, we're going to split that into 2 syllables and they've got to be able to start chunking and to be able to hear the vowel sounds and be able to sound and write. So they're reading two-syllable words. You want them to be writing at the same time and have more practice at these multi-syllable words for being able to read and spell. There's some spelling rules around this, but really it's about hearing for example, if you look at wildlife that hides, wildlife is a compound word. There are plenty of compound words in this set, but you really now want to teach them that skill instead of just sounding out 3 or 4 or maybe 5 sound words. You really want them to be sounding out multi-syllable words. And I wouldn't be suggesting for wildlife that you say all the sounds. I would say sound out wild, sound out life. If I can hear them say the sounds, sound and write wildlife. They should be able to do it by then. So I would be enhancing my routine, the same routine as earlier with saying the sounds and writing the sounds, but I've just changed my approach just a little bit. Here's a rule. English words do not end in I, we use Y instead. Now we're moving into the sets, like in set 17. I'm just going to hold up a book here, Buddies in the City. The word buddy will end in a Y, but once we add a suffix on, we're then going to go from this rule into how do we change when we add a suffix on and how does that change the spelling? We can then use the I, okay? So the Y and the I are interchangeable and the suffix ending stays the same. And that's where we have to teach those orthographic components, and that's where the spelling rule comes in. And the readers that you've got in these sets, Kate, they really reinforce it because there's so many words in the set for them to be able to not only read them with the endings on them, but they have to then go back and say, what is the root word or what is the base word there? Because it hasn't given it to you. And so you've got that opportunity to explicitly teach that. Children with learning difficulties can't do that. They will see a word like cries or happiest, and not happiest, but cries and tries. They cannot see that comes from the word cry. They're sounding out, going k-r-e-s, creas. So that's where your explicit teaching and reinforcement in your reading, in your routines and your reading comes in. Okay, I'm not doing too badly with time. I'm on 4:50. So we know we've got phonics and spelling rules. Going back to my phonics routine, if I know that AY says A at the end of a word, I will ask questions in a phonics routine. Okay, once I know that, I could teach that rule in a day and they already know it because I've already been asking them questions. Where can you hear this in the word day? Where can you hear this in the word play? So I don't have to teach that as much as I might those other rules with the C and the G. These rules here with the k and the j, the 3-letter j, I call it, and the 2-letter k. Again, it's a listening rule. They can hear it from listening and they can hear the vowel sound. So I can do this in a phonics review. And so I might have the CK come up as a phonics card and I will just ask them, where can you hear this in the word? I'm pretending to have one here. Back, and they might say at the end of the word. What sound is it? What sound is the A saying in the word back? And they'll say short sound at, so that they're reinforcing the rule there. So then when they go to write back, or they might write neck or brick, they already can apply their knowledge when they go to write the word that they should know. Short vowel sound, I need to use a 2-letter k. Or the short vowel sound, I need to use a 3-letter j. So that's a gradual release of responsibility. I'm teaching the rule. I might do a full teaching of it once I know that they're listening with that CK. But you can see now with this responsibility here, I'm changing their student responses. So here I might be saying, when can I use the 2-letter k? They might say, following a single vowel that says it's short sound. If they're really little, they might say, following a vowel that says a, e, or a. Then they might say this one. Then they might just say, following a short vowel. And then they might just eventually, after they're spelling it, they might just say, oh, that's rule 25. So I'm not just teaching them a number, I'm reducing the scaffold to increase the efficiency of our routines when we're going backwards and forwards with our dialogue within a routine. Okay, words. I've talked a little bit about the spellings and I showed you a chart earlier. They need more work. So I would recommend, yes, you can ask them questions during a phonics routine, but you really do need more practice on these words, and I would just have a poster up until they've mastered them. Here's your range of books that support that as far as reading and spelling, so that they've got more opportunities to be exposed to the words. The next set that I wanted to look at with you is the 111. So the 111 rule is when you have a word like hop. Hop has, like, it's a CVC word. So we know CVC means that it's one syllable, it has one single vowel, it's followed by a consonant letter. So we need to keep that vowel sound short. So we want to add ing to it. So because we want to do that, we're going to add another P before adding our ing. That is a spelling orthographic rule. You cannot work that out by listening. You cannot work that out by phonology. You've got to bring in orthography and knowledge and understanding. And the best way to sort of differentiate this is using the word hope, which I'll get to in a minute. The same thing goes for this rule, where you might have two-syllable words. The second syllable has the CVC, or one has a single vowel followed by a consonant, so I'm going to double it before adding my vowel ending. And then the next rule that I wanted to bring here is hope, to differentiate from hop. So now I know if I'm looking at hope and I want to add ing, okay, I don't need that E anymore. So now I'm not talking, this is why I don't call it a split digraph, because it has a function. The function of the E is it's doing something. Once it's no longer needed, it goes. Okay, so I don't need it here. Why don't I need it? Because we don't want to spell hoping with the E and the I together, because it's visually confusing. So it can go. We don't need it. And when we look at that, we can see that's the difference between hopping and hoping. If I see a double letters now, I know to pronounce the vowel sound short. So these rules, I'm not going to teach them in a phonics routine. I'm going to explicitly teach them after as a follow-up, and then I'm going to reinforce it through a little bit of spelling lists. Same with the Y changing to the I that I mentioned earlier. As I mentioned, children can't read this if they're just relying on sounding out. They do need to be taught. There's some lovely books that really reinforce this. I love the Getting to Know Our Earth, because it has the chapters are like hot, hotter, hottest. So you get to teach your superlatives as well. So there's lots of opportunity for language and grammar and punctuation that you can take from these books that reinforce spelling rules and orthography, as well as morphology and looking at the meanings of those suffixes as well. Okay, we can't just teach, obviously. So I just wanted to show you a couple of formative assessments that you can do. Once you've introduced them spelling rules, you really want some of your do nows to be checking them. So in the middle here, I might not have in the middle column, I may not even have the spellings. I might just have that being blank, and they have the hop, jump, run, sleep, fit. They have to add ing and then circle whether they double the last letter of the base word. They need as much opportunity to practice these as possible. And you cannot, I would say 60% of your children need this explicitly taught and practiced in a lot more detail and practice time, because, teaching in the middle years, I can see children and young kids they haven't learned this. So they might know it, but they haven't mastered it, and it does need a lot more practice. Here are some other examples of ways that you could just do a quick do now. This is the quickest and most effective way to reinforce rather than testing. You can still test, but then the children will know, and they get that feedback to know if they've got them correct or not. Okay, earlier I showed you these lists, and once you get to later, like in set 17 here. So this is a simple list of set 1, 2, and 3 of high frequency words. Now I'm thinking with the words, the high frequency words that I've got in set 17, I've got walk, once, play, today, by, out, could, and many. I'm now going to build my list here to be longer. So walk, I'm adding all my suffixes in. Once, I'm adding in one. Play, I'm adding in all my endings. And I'm teaching this to sort of reinforce other rules as we go. So that's all my spelling. I'm doing vocabulary at the same time. The only thing I would want to add here about vocabulary is whenever I'm dictating a word, especially in Prep 1 and 2 or Foundation 1 and 2, I want it to dictate it with a good, high quality, simple sentence most of the time before going into compound that demonstrates the meaning and usage of the word. So that way they are hearing the vocabulary, gaining meaning at the same time, and it's reinforcing what sentences are. That way I'm really integrating everything. So with that in mind, vocabulary, we're now looking at how to read and spell a word, what's the meaning of the word, what other words in vocabulary relate to it, and then how can I use that in sentence construction. Okay, I'm just going to click out here for a moment.
Yeah, I'm just
Just
going to let
before
you
we
know,
finish, it's
Jacinta.
5
Yeah,
o'clock.
we're
I've
right
got
on time.
1 minute. So I'm
Brilliant.
just about to finish. And just the last thing I wanted to say in this presentation, I'm just bringing this up, and is that, in fact, I will just stop sharing now and just talk to you because that is getting to the end. It's just hard because I can't see it. Is that the goal of routines is to integrate reading, handwriting, and spelling as much as you can so that you're opening up the space of your literacy block for reading and writing. Okay, we want to keep our routines tight and short so that it's not pushing out to 50 minutes or an hour. We really want to keep it nice to 30 minutes so that we've really got another 90 or even 45 to 90 minutes to explore and integrate our learning into other areas as well so that we're learning across the curriculum. Okay, that concludes my presentation. I'm right on 5:02. I know I've packed a lot in. I do want to ask if anyone has any questions. We quite often do get questions on spelling. Can you see any in the chat,
Yeah, we're
Kate?
just having a look. There's none at the moment in the chat. I sort of feel like actually probably a lot of people are going to come and wait for that linked for your session, Jacinta, and come
Yeah,
back and
yeah.
review. But I
There
do want
might
to,
be a lot of questions, but
that's
I
right.
think my
They
big
can email
takeaway
us
is,
as well and we can
yeah,
pass them on. We're happy to
yeah.
do that too.
Yeah. The decodables that you get in the first early sets, they help you learn to decode, but it's the new decodables that have come out that really enable you to inquire and explore language in more detail and apply, once you've taught a spelling rule, apply in application when you're reading so that you can come back to the books and use them in different ways. And the fact that a book has, for example, changing Y to I at the back, that means that you've got a tool to go and use to be able to teach more than just reading. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time, everybody.
Well,
I
thank you,
really appreciate
Jacinta.
it.
And we will let
Yeah.
everybody go, and everyone's thanking you in the chat. So
All right.
thank you for
Thank you so
everyone
much.
attending. Bye bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.